For 300 years, the Vorithaean Empire had a stranglehold on the galaxy. And that's not an exaggeration. It was a simple, terrifying truth that every species understood. Their iron fist ruled over 2,000 star systems, backed by a navy of tens of thousands of warships. If the Vorithaeans wanted something, it was theirs. If they gave an order, you followed it. That was the law of the universe. The Galactic Council, this grand meeting on a station adrift in space, was supposed to be a place for diplomacy. But with 47 different species gathered, everyone knew it was just a stage for the Vorithaeans to make their demands sound like suggestions. They would talk and debate, of course, but the final vote always went one way. Any planet that got brave and stepped out of line was crushed by sanctions, blockades, or something far worse. The one in charge, High Chancellor Vexith, was a figure of pure dread. His people looked vaguely like us, but with skin like gray granite and eyes that gave off a faint, unsettling red glow. His voice was a low rumble, like a storm gathering miles away. Vexith's chair was the largest in the chamber, perched on a platform that put him above everyone else. It wasn't part of any official rules, but no one was foolish enough to object. And today, he had called them all for a very special announcement. The other delegates shifted nervously in their seats, a tense quiet filling the massive hall. Some whispered behind their hands, others just stared blankly ahead, trying to appear calm. But they all felt that familiar knot in their stomachs. They had a pretty good idea what this was about. The Vorithaeans had found a new prize. "Distinguished members of the Council," Vexith's voice boomed, needing no microphone to reach every corner. "The Empire has made a new discovery, one that will benefit every species under our care. Our scouts have charted a new world on the galaxy's fringe. Our systems designate it Sol 3, but its primitive inhabitants have another name for it, Earth." A ripple of movement went through the delegates as they leaned forward, just a fraction. A new world meant new resources, new labor, and a tidal wave of new wealth straight into the Empire's vaults. Naturally, if a species was particularly well-behaved, they might get a few crumbs. "Our initial scans," Vexith went on, "reveal a planet rich in minerals and teeming with life. More importantly, it is home to a species that calls itself human. Our intelligence division has just completed its assessment, and frankly, the findings are adorable." He gestured, and a colossal hologram flickered into existence in the center of the room. It showed a gorgeous blue and green world with swirling white clouds orbiting a yellow star. Then it zoomed in, showing cities, highways, and the people. "As you can see," Vexith said, a smirk playing on his lips, "the humans are laughably primitive. They've just started to venture beyond their own atmosphere. Their most advanced ships still rely on chemical combustion. Can you imagine? Chemical combustion. It's like trying to cross an ocean in a rowboat. They seem to think that landing a few of their own on their moon is some kind of legendary accomplishment." A few of the delegates let out forced, nervous chuckles. Chemical rockets were ancient history, something you'd find in a museum, not on a starship. It was like finding a lost tribe that was still impressed by fire. "And listen to this," Vexith added. "The humans don't even have a unified world government. They're fractured into nearly 200 different tribes, most of which are busy fighting each other over patches of dirt, shiny rocks, and silly beliefs. Their most powerful weapons are primitive atom splitters, devices they call nuclear bombs. I suppose they're effective for blowing up their own cities, but they are utterly useless against modern energy shielding." More images flashed across the hologram, bustling human cities and tiny, flimsy-looking spacecraft. To the advanced species in that chamber, the humans looked like toddlers playing with building blocks. "The Empire has therefore decided," Vexith announced, his voice becoming cold and hard, "that Sol 3 and its entire system will be annexed into our territory. The humans will be offered one opportunity to surrender and serve the Empire. Should they refuse, we will proceed with a standard military pacification. Fleet Admiral Kreth has been assigned to command the 7th Subjugation Fleet for this task." A hologram of the Admiral materialized beside the image of Earth. Kreth was even more imposing than Vexith, his armor covered in honors from centuries spent crushing other civilizations. His red eyes burned with an intensity that came from his genetically engineered combat instincts. Kreth had personally brought 9 species to heel. He had never once failed. The 7th Fleet is composed of 847 warships, Vexith stated matter-of-factly. This includes 6 dreadnoughts, 42 battleships, 150 cruisers, and all necessary support vessels. Now, the standard protocol for a pre-faster-than-light world is a force of about 100 ships. However, Admiral Kreth requested the additional assets to make a memorable impression. We want the humans to understand, immediately and without a shred of doubt, that resistance is not an option. The delegate from Thaxia, a small insectoid being, timidly raised a claw. High Chancellor, if I may, is such a large fleet truly necessary for a species of this level? It seems excessive. Vexith's glowing red eyes locked onto the Thaxian, who instantly retracted its limb. The size of the fleet is not about necessity, delegate, Vexith growled. It is about making a statement to everyone. The Empire's might is absolute. Our resources are infinite. We can assign nearly 1,000 warships to a single, insignificant planet because we have tens of thousands more in reserve. Let this serve as a lesson to you all. The Thaxian delegate practically shrank into its chair. The message was crystal clear. The Vorathaians could obliterate anyone with overwhelming force, even an opponent who posed no threat whatsoever. The operation will commence in 3 standard weeks, Vexith continued. The 7th Fleet is currently mustering at staging point Gamma. Admiral Kreth anticipates the entire conquest will be concluded in less than 1 of their Earth days. The humans will see our armada fill their ski. They will receive our terms. They will surrender. If they are foolish enough to fight, their entire military will be annihilated within hours. Following that, we will initiate our standard integration protocols. And every delegate in that chamber knew exactly what standard integration protocols was code for. The humans would be stripped of all weapons. Their planet would be mined for every valuable resource and taxed into oblivion. Their population would become a source of cheap labor for the Empire's grand projects. Their culture would be permitted to exist only so long as it didn't inconvenience their new Vorathaian masters. Within a single generation, Earth would be nothing more than another gear in the Imperial machine. Its people just another nameless, faceless workforce serving their overlords. This council session is now adjourned, Vexith announced. You will all be provided a live broadcast from the 7th Fleet's mission. The Admiral has graciously agreed to stream the entire event so the galaxy can witness Vorathaian efficiency firsthand. I expect every one of you to watch, and to ensure your homeworlds are watching as well. Let it be a reminder of our power and of the absolute stupidity of defiance. With that, Vexith turned and strode from the chamber, leaving the delegates wrapped in a heavy, fearful silence. One by one, they slowly rose and shuffled out, heading back to their quarters to deliver the news. In a quiet corridor, the Thaxian delegate caught up to the representative from Draxus, a massive, fur-covered, wolf-like being. "Do you think they have any idea?" the Thaxian whispered. "The humans. Do they have even a hint of what's about to happen to them?" The Draxian shook its huge head. How could they? They're barely even sure anyone else is out here. For decades, they've been beaming radio signals into the void, hoping for an answer. Well, an answer is coming, and it's the worst one they could ever get. "I almost feel sorry for them," the Thaxian murmured. Listening to their old broadcasts, they sound so optimistic. They talk about peace and different species cooperating for the common good. "Then they're naive," the Draxian replied, though his voice held a trace of melancholy. "The galaxy isn't a family, it's a food chain. The Vorathaians are at the top, and the rest of us just try to avoid being eaten. That's the brutal reality. The humans are about to get a very harsh education in how the universe truly works." "Well, at least they might survive," the Thaxian said, desperately searching for a bright side. The Voratheians don't typically exterminate a species if they surrender immediately. If the humans are smart, they'll just kneel. Perhaps, the Draxian rumbled, but I've reviewed their history. Humans are a stubborn bunch. They fight each other all the time, but they have this strange, illogical pride. They might do something incredibly foolish. They might actually try to fight. Then they will be wiped from existence, the Thaxian said with a sigh. 847 Voratheian warships versus chemical rockets and atomic bombs. It wasn't a war. It was pest extermination. The two delegates parted ways. All across the station, similar conversations were taking place. A few felt a pang of pity for the humans, but most were simply relieved that the Empire's hungry gaze was fixed on someone else. Model D. Have you ever had to stand by and watch a bully pick on someone 100 times smaller, knowing that if you said a word, you'd be the next one on the ground? That's the exact knot of helpless rage twisting in the guts of dozens of alien species as they tuned into the feed. They knew speaking up wasn't just risky, it was a death sentence. And if you think that's bad, stick around, because you won't believe how this story ends. Miles above, in a fortified command center reserved only for the Voratheian elite, High Chancellor Vexith was in a holographic meeting with Admiral Kreth, whose shimmering giant image towered over the room. The Council's been notified, Vexith reported. They'll be watching, as the law requires. A few of them mumbled about feeling sorry for the humans, but not a single one dared to vote against the annexation. Of course not, Kreth sneered. They're terrified of us. That's exactly how it should be. Did you go over my battle plans? I did. The fleet you've assembled seems a bit much. I signed off on the extra ships because your logic was sound, Vexith said. This entire operation needs to be a show of overwhelming, soul-crushing force. Let the entire galaxy watch and learn what happens when a species can't pull its own weight. Kreth gave a sharp, satisfied nod. The 7th Fleet will reach the Sol system in precisely 3 weeks. We'll drop out of hyperspace right next to their 4th planet, a red, dusty rock they call Mars. From there, we'll broadcast our standard ultimatum in all their major languages. I've looked into their tech. They have this primitive little network they call the Internet that connects their whole world. We're going to hijack it and blast our message across every single screen they own simultaneously. Vexith leaned forward, a spark of interest in his eyes. And how do you expect them to react? Absolute, total panic, Kreth said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Their governments will be tripping over each other to contact us. It'll be beautiful chaos as they argue and blame one another. A few might try to puff out their chests and act tough, but their military leaders will figure out pretty fast that they don't stand a chance. I give them 6 hours max before they're begging us to accept their surrender. And if they say no, Vexith asked. If they say no, Kreth continued, we start vaporizing their military installations one by one. They'll break after we turn a few of them into smoking craters. And if they're still feeling defiant after that, Kreth's eyes took on a dark, hungry gleam. Then we begin orbital strikes on their biggest cities. Trust me, turning one of their precious cities to ash will be more than enough. They'll fold instantly. Humans are laughably emotional. Our psych profiles show they'd never sacrifice their own people for a war they know they can't win. Excellent. Just remember, Admiral, Vexith warned, the whole galaxy is watching this. Keep it clean, keep it fast, and make it absolutely terrifying. I want every single species tuning in to be reminded that the Empire is unstoppable. Consider it done, High Chancellor, Kreth replied with a salute. The 7th Fleet will bring nothing but glory to the Empire. As for the humans, they'll be a forgotten little footnote in our great history. Just another primitive race that learned its place is on its knees before Voratheian might. The hologram flickered and died, leaving Vexith alone in the silent chamber. He walked to a massive viewport, gazing out at the endless sea of stars. Somewhere in that immense darkness, the human race was going about its day, completely clueless that its fate had just been decided. In just 3 short weeks, everything they knew would be torn apart. Vexith felt no guilt, not even a twinge. In his mind, the galaxy was a simple equation. The strong rule the weak. The smart control the simple. The Empire took what it wanted for one very clear reason. Because it could. It was the law of the jungle, just written across the cosmos. The humans were about to get a very painful education, and the rest of the galaxy would be taking notes, remembering why you never, ever stand up to the Empire. 3 weeks. That was all the time Earth had left. The Voratheian 7th Fleet tore a gash in reality, pouring out of hyperspace like a dark stain spreading across the void. 847 warships materialized near Mars, their obsidian hulls drinking the light of the distant sun. Every ship was a killer, designed for one purpose: total domination. Their smallest ships were the size of a human aircraft carrier. Their biggest dreadnoughts were over 5 kilometers long, covered in enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. On the bridge of the flagship, the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kreth watched the red globe of Mars grow larger on the main view screen as his fleet settled into a perfect, menacing formation. All around him, Voratheian officers moved with the calm, practiced efficiency of a well-oiled war machine. The bridge itself felt more like a temple to conquest, with ceilings that soared 20 meters high and walls that flowed with streams of tactical data. "Fleet formation is locked, Admiral," the tactical officer reported. "All ships report green status. The jump was perfect." "Scan the system," Kreth commanded. "Full spectrum analysis. I want to know where every human ship, satellite, and piece of space junk is. No surprises." The sensor officer's fingers flew across her console, directing the fleet's powerful sensor arrays toward the third planet from the sun. "Scanning now, Admiral. Initial pings show a cloud of artificial satellites orbiting their home world, mostly primitive communication and weather trackers. We're also picking up chemical rocket launches from the surface. Looks like routine trips to a tiny orbital station. We detect 0 military vessels outside their atmosphere." Kreth nodded, a smug smirk playing on his lips. It was exactly what their intelligence had suggested. The humans had barely dipped their toes in the cosmic ocean, with a dinky little space station and no real navy to speak of. They had no patrols, no early warning systems beyond those basic satellites. They were completely blind to any threat coming from beyond their own moon. "Open a channel to the Galactic Council," Kreth ordered. "Broadcast on all public feeds. Let everyone witness this glorious moment." Across the galaxy, on the Central Council Station, and on the homeworlds of 47 member species, screens blinked to life. Trillions of beings were now watching the Voratheian fleet hanging in the darkness, a silent testament to destruction. In the Great Council Hall, delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, bracing for what they expected to be a swift and brutal show. "Channel is live, Admiral," the comms officer confirmed. "Attention, inhabitants of Earth," Kreth began, his voice booming as the ship's computers translated it into 17 of Earth's most common languages in real time. "I am Fleet Admiral Kreth of the Voratheian Empire. Your world has been chosen for annexation. You are to cease all military actions immediately and prepare to receive our occupation forces. You have 6 hours to broadcast your unconditional surrender. Comply, and your people will be peacefully integrated into our glorious empire. We will shelter you, we will guide you, and we will put your world to productive use. But if you resist, we will bring total annihilation. You cannot win, you cannot escape. Your only choice is to decide how you will survive. Obey and live. Resist and be erased. You have 6 hours." The message cut off. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, the officers exchanged confident looks. Their intelligence report suggested it would take the humans at least an hour just to process the message. They braced for a flood of panicked signals, mass confusion, maybe even a few desperate pleas for more time. The actual response came in less than 2 minutes. It was a single audio file, no video, from a source identifying itself as NORAD Combined Space Command. The voice was a human male, speaking English in a calm, almost casual tone. "Yeah, that's gonna be a no from us. Maintain your current position beyond lunar orbit or you will be fired upon. This is your one and only warning. NORAD out." For a solid 10 seconds, the bridge of the Eternal Dominion was dead silent. Officers just stared at one another, completely dumbfounded. Then, Admiral Kreth started to laugh. It was a deep, rumbling sound that filled the massive command center. "Did you hear that?" he bellowed, gesturing to his crew. "They just threatened us!" A species that still uses glorified bottle rockets to get into orbit just threatened the Vorathaean Empire. They warned us. He laughed again, harder this time. "I have brought 9 civilizations to their knees. I have personally given the order to turn entire worlds into glass. And these little insects think they can fire upon us?" Across the galaxy, the reaction was pure shock. In the council chamber, delegates glanced around nervously. The Thaxian ambassador leaned over to his Draxian counterpart. They said no. In 2 minutes. They didn't even hold a meeting. "They're insane," the Draxian whispered back. "Or they have absolutely no idea what they're up against." On the Eternal Dominion, Kreth's laughter died in his throat, replaced by a cold, sharp rage. "Communications!" the Admiral barked. "Send a reply. Tell them they've just made the biggest mistake of their short, pathetic lives. We're advancing on their world, and our only terms are their immediate and unconditional surrender. Anything less, and we'll turn their planet into a smoking cinder." The comms officer started to reply. "Yes, Admiral," but Kreth cut him off with a wave. "You know what? Scratch that. We're done talking. Words are for equals, not animals. All ships, full advance on Earth. Form up for bombardment. It's time we taught these humans the price of defiance." As one, the colossal fleet moved. 847 warships surged toward the little blue planet, a flawless, disciplined wave of pure destruction. The massive dreadnoughts made up the core, protected by layers of battleships and cruisers, while nimble destroyers raced ahead like a screen of hungry sharks. It was the perfect formation for crushing a weaker foe, a textbook display of shock and awe. "Time to orbital insertion," Admiral Kreth demanded. "At this velocity, 43 minutes, sir." "Excellent," he smirked. "Keep all sensors cranked to maximum. If these little humans are stupid enough to launch one of their primitive fireworks at us, I want to see it coming." But just then, the sensor officer's voice sliced through the bridge's calm, sharp with panic. "Admiral, contacts. Contacts everywhere. Hundreds. No, wait. Thousands of new signatures are popping up all over the system." "What?" Kreth stormed over to the sensor station. "Where did they come from? Did they use FTL? That's impossible. They don't have that kind of tech." The officer, her eyes wide with terror, stammered, "No FTL trace, sir. They were already here. They were hiding. They're dropping some kind of stealth field. They were all around us, sir. Everywhere. Hiding in the asteroid belt, lurking near the gas giants, even tucked into orbit around Mars. We had flown straight into a box, and we never even saw the lid closing. On the main view screen, the tactical map was exploding with new contacts. Small red dots flickered into existence, first a few dozen, then hundreds upon hundreds. Each one represented a ship of a totally unknown design, positioned throughout our solar system in what could only be a perfectly executed ambush. Across the galaxy, delegates from other species watched the live feed in stunned silence. The Thaxian representative shot up from his chair. "How is this possible? Our intelligence said they didn't have a fleet capable of deep space travel." Kreth just stared, his mind racing to catch up. "Analysis? What the hell are we looking at? What are these ships capable of?" The answer sent a chill down his spine. "Unknown, Admiral. They're not in any of our databases. Their energy readings are completely alien. They don't match any known drive system. It looks like some kind of reaction drive, but the power output is off the charts, far beyond what a pre-lightspeed civilization should have. Sir, they're running cold, with almost no heat signature. That's how they slipped past our long-range scans completely." "Give me a ship count, now!" Kreth ordered. "We're still counting, sir. The number is climbing to 437 contacts. Wait, it's now 612. Sir, more are dropping their cloaking fields by the second. 600 ships against their 800. The odds were still in their favor, but this was a far cry from the cakewalk they had been promised. These humans weren't some backwater species just learning to walk in space. They had been waiting. They had been preparing. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth, the communications officer announced. Put it on screen, Kreth commanded. The same cold, robotic voice from NORAD that they'd heard before echoed across the bridge. Varathion Fleet, you were warned to hold your position outside lunar orbit. You have now violated our defensive perimeter. You will immediately withdraw to a position beyond the orbit of Mars, or we will open fire. You have 60 seconds to comply. Kreth's hands balled into tight fists. Withdraw? They dare order us to retreat? Lock every weapon on the nearest human ship. All vessels, prepare to fire on my command. We're about to give these upstarts a lesson in what happens when you threaten the Empire. The tactical officer spoke up, his voice cautious. Admiral, with respect, I strongly advise caution. We have no idea what their capabilities are. Perhaps we should— Silence! Kreth roared. We are the Vorathian Empire. We do not show caution to primitives. We do not back down. All ships target the human fleet and fire at will. The Vorathian fleet unleashed hell. A blinding storm of energy weapons lit up the darkness of space as thousands of plasma bolts screamed toward the human ships. It was the kind of overwhelming force that could crack planets and vaporize entire armadas. But the human ships just dodged. They didn't glide or bank like normal spacecraft. They moved in short, violent, unpredictable bursts, their engines firing in sharp, jarring patterns. The Vorathian targeting systems, designed to track the graceful, predictable arcs of traditional warships, couldn't get a solid lock. 90% of their shots blasted harmlessly into the void. The few that did find their mark slammed into the human ships, causing their shields to flare. But these weren't energy shields like the Vorathians used. It was something else entirely. It looked like layers of armor that literally boiled away under the impact, sacrificing an outer layer to protect the ship's core. It was a brutal, almost primitive-looking defense, but it was working. They're breaking formation, sir, the tactical officer reported, his voice strained. They're flying completely erratically. Our targeting computers can't keep up. And then the humans fired back. The first shot came from a ship that had been hiding in Mars's shadow. It wasn't a laser or a plasma bolt. It was something far simpler and 1,000 times more terrifying. It was a solid chunk of metal launched by electromagnetic rails at 30% of the speed of light. A kinetic kill vehicle. Just a dense slug moving at an unbelievable velocity. It struck the lead dreadnought, the Glorious Conquest, dead center. The ship's shields, engineered to deflect energy, were completely useless against a solid object moving that fast. The projectile punched through the shields like they were made of soap bubbles. It tore through 2 kilometers of armored plating, ripped through deck after deck, and slammed directly into the ship's reactor core. The Glorious Conquest simply came apart. Its reactor went critical, erupting in a silent, brilliant flash of light so bright it was visible from Earth. 5,000 Vorathian soldiers were vaporized in an instant. The shockwave from the blast crippled 2 nearby cruisers. On the Galactic Council station, the delegates stared at their screens in utter disbelief. The Draxian delegate whispered, "They destroyed a dreadnought in a single shot. How?" But the humans gave them no time to process it. More kinetic slugs screamed in from hidden positions all across the solar system. They were cheap, simple chunks of metal, but at those speeds, they were unstoppable. Vorathian shields were useless. Vorathian armor might as well have been tissue paper. Ships that had conquered entire star systems were being torn to shreds by weapons the rest of the galaxy would have considered a joke. "Evasive action!" Kreth screamed, his voice cracking. "All ships scatter! Break formation! We have to dodge these things!" But the humans had anticipated that too. As the Vorathian fleet broke apart in chaos, the human ships surged forward, closing the distance. And once they were close, they unleashed a whole new arsenal. Missiles that could change direction on a whim, seemingly defying the laws of physics. Warheads carrying nuclear payloads that detonated right on top of Vorithaean hulls. And lasers powered by contained atomic explosions that sliced through armor plating in close-quarters dogfights. "They're all over us!" the sensor officer yelled. "Sir, they're using the wreckage of our own ships as cover. They're hiding in the debris fields and ambushing us." Kreth could only watch in abject terror as his magnificent fleet was dismantled piece by bloody piece. The humans fought like nothing he had ever seen. They had no honor, no formations, no tactics he could possibly anticipate. They attacked from insane angles, used decoys and electronic warfare to sow confusion, and even sacrificed their own smaller ships to draw fire so that their heavy hitters could line up the perfect kill shot. "Order a retreat!" Kreth finally choked out, his voice breaking. "All ships fall back to Mars orbit. We have to regroup and—" "Sir, our hyperspace drives are being jammed. The humans are blocking our FTL." "What? That's impossible. They shouldn't have that kind of technology." "They might not, sir, but we can't jump. Any ship that tries is getting nothing but critical failure alarms." And in that one gut-wrenching moment, Admiral Kreth finally understood. The humans had been listening. They had studied Vorithaean technology, analyzed their communications, and built an entire arsenal designed specifically to counter every single one of their weaknesses. They were trapped in a solar system with an enemy they had dismissed as helpless primitives. The battle devolved into a brutal, terrifyingly efficient slaughter. Every species across the galaxy watched, their entire perception of humanity shattering with every passing second. This was timestamp 0. The Vorithaean fleet, now just a panicked mob of dying ships, was desperately trying to form some kind of defensive line. Admiral Kreth's orders were screaming across every channel, begging his captains to get back into standard formations. But their standard tactics were completely useless. The humans had been studying Vorithaean strategy for 40 years. They had watched every public broadcast of every battle the Empire had ever won. It was supposed to be a simple victory, but Admiral Kreth never saw it coming. The moment his fleet warped in, the entire human solar system woke up and chose violence. Ships that were dormant for decades in the asteroid belt ignited their engines, charging straight into the fray. What looked like dead satellites orbiting Jupiter suddenly revealed themselves as massive railgun platforms. Even Saturn's rings held a surprise, as hidden vessels broke free from their icy camouflage to join the fight. The humans hadn't just fortified their world, they'd turned their entire star system into a kill box, and the Vorithaeans had just walked right in. At the 247-second mark, the battleship Pride of Empire finally landed a hit, blasting a human frigate into scrap with a plasma cannon. The tiny ship blew apart, its crew of 200 souls lost to the vacuum of space. For just a heartbeat, Kreth felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could still win this. On paper, this should have been a slaughter. The Vorithaean fleet had more ships, bigger cannons, and superior technology. The humans were seen as little more than a pest, launching a desperate surprise attack that was doomed from the start. Or so the Empire believed. But then, 6 human destroyers materialized from the fireball of their own fallen frigate. The terrible realization clicked into place a second too late. The ship wasn't a casualty. It was bait. It was dangled out there to force the Pride of Empire to fire and give away its exact position. The instant it did, human targeting systems locked on. The 6 destroyers fired as one, not with energy beams, but with a torrent of missiles. We're talking dozens from each ship, a swarm of over 100 warheads all screaming toward a single point in space. The Pride of Empire's defense cannons lit up the void, but they didn't stand a chance. A cluster of silent nuclear explosions bloomed across the battleship's shields, cracking them wide open before tearing through its hull like a cheap can. The very last missile in the volley slipped through the chaos and burrowed deep into the ship's reactor. The Pride of Empire didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist in a flash of pure white light, taking its 4 escort cruisers with it in the shockwave. The smaller ships were sent tumbling into the dark, dead and powerless. Billions of light years away, species that had trembled under the Vorathean boot watched the broadcast, caught between abject terror and a grim kind of glee. The Taxian delegate gripped his chair with all four hands, his eyes wide. The Draxian next to him was shaking. "They're using tactics we never even dreamed of," he whispered. The Draxian observer just couldn't wrap his mind around it. "How are they doing that?" he stammered. "Every ship is moving on its own, yet they're all perfectly in sync. There's no command ship calling the shots, no single leader to take out. It's like they're all one." He was dead on. What the aliens saw as pure chaos was actually a perfectly orchestrated symphony of destruction. Every single human ship, gun, and sensor was plugged into one massive shared network. They were seeing the battle through a million eyes at once, their computers processing the data as a single consciousness, systematically dismantling the enemy fleet piece by piece. It was a hive mind of wire and steel, a superorganism of death. At the 512-second mark, the cold truth finally crashed down on Admiral Kreth. He wasn't fighting a ragtag militia. He was fighting an enemy that had been preparing for this war for generations. Every weapon they deployed was tailor-made to exploit a weakness in Vorathean tech. Every single maneuver was designed to counter a strategy he thought was a state secret. "All ships, retreat!" Kreth's voice, once booming with authority, was now a strangled cry of panic. "Fall back to Mars and fire up the hyperspace drives!" His fleet desperately tried to obey, turning and burning their engines toward the black. But you can't just instantly jump to hyperspace. The ship's computers need a full 30 seconds to calculate a safe trajectory. 30 seconds to plot a course that doesn't send you careening into a star. 30 seconds where you have to fly in a perfectly straight, predictable line for the jump to even work. And the humans knew it. The Voratheans had boasted about their rapid jump technology in galactic news feeds for years. The humans didn't just watch the ads, they built their entire battle plan around that one tiny 30-second window of total helplessness. The instant a Vorathean ship straightened its course to make the jump, a fresh hellstorm of human missiles would scream its way. Every single ship that tried to run became the #1 target on the board. Kinetic slugs, nuclear warheads, and focused lasers hammered the defenseless vessels, turning them into expanding clouds of shrapnel or sending them spinning helplessly into the void. "We can't run and we can't fight," the tactical officer screamed, his professionalism shattering. "Sir, they're just picking us apart. We've lost 43 ships in the last 60 seconds. All Admiral Kreth could do was stare at his display as the red icons representing his fleet winked out of existence, one after another. This was supposed to be a show of force, a quick and easy conquest. This was an execution. At the 833-second mark, the Vorathean cruiser Infinite Victory finally scored a solid hit, vaporizing a human frigate that had gotten a little too close. A dark smile crossed the lips of its captain Threxus. At last, they could still hit back. That tiny flicker of success lasted exactly 4 seconds. 6 human destroyers that had been pretending to retreat suddenly flipped around and charged. They'd sacrificed yet another of their own ships as bait, a trick that, impossibly, was still working. The humans just didn't seem to care about their ships the way the Voratheans did. To them, a ship was just a tool, a bullet to be fired if it meant taking out a more important enemy piece. It was a cold, brutal math that was utterly alien to the Voratheans, whose entire culture was built around the honor and glory of their legendary warships. The destroyers opened up at point-blank range. The Infinite Victory and its 3 escorts were shredded from every angle at once, their shields failing, their armor vaporizing, and their reactors going critical. In less than a minute, 4 more Vorathean capital ships were gone, their burning wreckage joining the ever-growing junkyard now orbiting Earth. Across the galaxy, the alien races glued to the live feed were finally starting to get it. This wasn't a battle. It was a lesson. Humanity was making a statement. Having the biggest guns in the galaxy doesn't mean a thing if you don't have the brains or the guts to use them right. The Voratheans had bigger ships, but the humans had a smarter strategy, better discipline, and a frankly terrifying willingness to sacrifice anything and everything to win. Then, at the 1,109-second mark, Admiral Kreth's own flagship, the Eternal Dominion, took a direct hit to its command bridge. A kinetic slug fired from a human dreadnought slammed into the vessel exactly where human intelligence said the Admiral would be. The projectile, traveling at a terrifying fraction of the speed of light, tore through 30 meters of reinforced armor before its tactical nuke detonated deep inside the command center. Admiral Kreth had just a moment to comprehend his failure. He saw the ceiling peel away like paper. He saw his command staff thrown across the room like dolls. He saw fire erupt from every console as the main view screen shattered, ripping the air from his lungs. His last words, broadcast over an open channel for the entire galaxy to hear, were a choked-out scream of pure, undiluted fury. "How? You animals!" And then the Eternal Dominion's reactor core breached. The flagship that had crushed 9 separate rebellions, the ship that had glassed entire planets, the vessel they called unbeatable, cracked into 3 enormous pieces in a cloud of debris. Admiral Kreth and his crew of 12,000 were simply gone. The death of the flagship sent the rest of the Vorathian fleet into a complete death spiral. With no one giving orders, it was total chaos. Some ships tried to fight, others tried to flee, and a handful just powered down their weapons, begging for mercy. The humans answered their pleas with more cannon fire. This was never about conquest. This was pest control. And every last Vorathian ship was on the list. The human fleet wasn't going to stop until every last one of them was a cold, drifting tomb. There would be no prisoners taken, no survivors to report back, and no witnesses except for the stunned alien races watching from across the stars. At the 1,322-second mark, a single Vorathian scout ship, the Swift Messenger, managed to punch through the chaos. Its captain was a young officer named Keyleth, and he was at the helm of the fastest ship in their armada. Scout ships were built to run, not to fight. Keyleth pushed the engines into the red, flying them far past their safety limits as he raced for the edge of the solar system. He just needed to get clear of the sun's gravity well to make a clean hyperspace jump. He was so close. He was actually going to escape. The human fleet was tied up dealing with the bigger warships, too far away and too busy to chase him down. Just a few more minutes and he'd be home free. He would be the one to warn the Empire that humanity wasn't a pushover. They were a sleeping giant. He would tell them this whole invasion was a colossal mistake and that every single thing they thought they knew about these primitives was dead wrong. And that's when a lone human ship appeared on his sensors. It was accelerating from behind Saturn's moons at a speed that was physically impossible. No ship should be able to move that fast. The sheer G-forces would have turned any organic crew into soup. It was pulling off maneuvers that would snap a vessel in half. For 300 years, the Vorathian Empire was the biggest bully in the galaxy, and they had just decided that Earth was their next easy target. But in the final terrifying moments of his life, a pilot named Keyleth realized they had made a horrible mistake. The ship hunting him wasn't flown by a person. It was an AI-driven drone, and it was moving in ways no living thing could survive. At 1358, it didn't fire a laser. It just slammed into his scout ship, vaporizing them both. But right before the flash, Keyleth got one last message out. It was a desperate scream for help on an emergency channel, a warning that would take years to crawl back home. And it was chillingly simple. Earth is not what we thought. They were ready. They were waiting. The fleet is gone. For the love of the Empire, do not come here. Just 2 minutes later, at 1400 hours, the very last Vorathian ship, a crippled vessel hiding behind Mars, got wiped off the map by a wave of missiles. The captain never even had a chance to say, "We surrender." Human computers simply calculated that the damaged ship might escape, so they ordered it destroyed. And just like that, the war was over. 4 hours earlier, 847 Vorathian warships had swaggered into our solar system. Now, all that was left was floating scrap metal. The human fleet lost 63 ships, but every single one was a planned sacrifice, like trading a pawn to take the queen. The final score was insane, a kill ratio of over 13-1. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, delegates from 1,000 different worlds just stared in shocked silence. The Vorithian delegate looked like a statue, his eyes wide and empty. Imagine being the meanest kid on the playground for 3 centuries, only to get knocked out cold by the quiet new kid with a single punch. A Thaxian delegate finally broke the silence, his voice a dry whisper. The Vorithian Empire. They've ruled for 300 years. They've crushed 17 civilizations without ever losing a real fight. And a species we all thought were primitives just erased their entire navy in 14 minutes. A grim-faced Draxian turned to him. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "This didn't take 14 minutes. This started 40 years ago, the moment humanity first heard our radio signals. They've been getting ready ever since." They had built their entire arsenal in secret, trained their soldiers in the darkness, and turned their whole solar system into a massive hidden trap. And then they just waited, letting the galaxy think they were harmless. Suddenly, a new message took over every screen in the room. A human woman's face appeared, translated instantly for everyone. Her words were simple and sent a shiver down every spine in the room. "This is Representative Chen," she said. "As of today, Earth is closed. Any ship that enters our space will be destroyed. There will be no warnings and no negotiations. Stay out of our home, and we'll stay out of yours. But if you come looking for trouble, you will end up just like the Vorithians. This is your first and only warning." The message cut out, leaving the galaxy in a dead silence filled with a terrifying new truth. Humanity hadn't just joined the galactic community with a friendly hello. They had kicked down the door. The council chamber was packed tighter than it had ever been. Everyone wanted to know the same thing, what just happened, and the unspoken question that hung in the air was, are we next? High Chancellor Vexith stood up, but his usual commanding presence was gone. He just looked scared. "The council recognizes the human delegation," he said, his voice weak. "We are here to demand an explanation for what just happened in the Sol system." In the middle of the hall, a life-sized hologram of Representative Chen appeared. She wore a simple dark blue uniform with no medals. She was a small woman with short hair and a completely unreadable expression. She had the calm look of someone holding all the best cards. "High Chancellor," Chen began, her voice perfectly calm. "You say we have explaining to do. I don't think so. We don't owe you anything. But to make sure there are no future misunderstandings, I'll give you one." The Thaxian counselor, choosing his words very carefully, asked the question on everyone's mind. "Representative, our spies said your people were centuries away from traveling faster than light. You didn't have shields or plasma cannons. How did you beat a fleet that had all of that and more?" Chen actually smiled, but it was a cold, sharp thing. "Counselor, your question shows the huge mistake you all made about Earth. You scanned our toys and thought you understood us. You saw rockets and nuclear power and dismissed us as children. You were dead wrong." A timeline appeared next to her. 40 years ago, our telescopes picked up your radio chatter. We heard the Vorithians bragging about their victories and planning their attacks. We learned 2 things that day. First, we weren't alone. And second, the neighborhood was run by a gang of bullies who wiped out new species like us for sport. A nervous energy filled the chamber. A lot of these delegates had voted to approve those Vorithian pacification campaigns. Chen went on. "So for the first time in our history, all the nations of Earth agreed on one thing. We would not be their next victim. We would get ready for the day the Vorithians came knocking." "You spent 40 years getting ready for one fight?" a Draxian general asked in disbelief. "How do you keep a secret that big?" "Simple," Chen said. "We went dark. We shut down every deep space radio. No more friendly messages into the void. To the rest of you, it looked like we were exactly what you thought, a backward planet, totally clueless. You had no idea what we were building in the shadows." The hologram changed, showing huge shipyards hidden inside asteroids and military bases on the dark side of the moon. We spent 15% of our entire planet's economic output on one military project. We built our fleets where your sensors would only see rock and ice. We trained generations for a war we prayed would never happen. And we designed every last piece of it to be completely invisible to you.
But your technology, Vexith shouted, his voice cracking. Your weapons were just metal slugs. That's ancient. They shouldn't have even been able to get through our shields.
Chen looked directly at the broken Vorathian delegate. We studied you, High Chancellor. For 40 years, we listened. We analyzed every single battle you fought, your ship designs, your shield codes, your armor, your tactics. You were so proud of your power that you broadcast all your secrets across the galaxy for anyone to hear.
She let that hang in the air for a moment. You literally gave us the instruction manual on how to beat you.
Your shields are built to stop energy, but they can't do much against a solid piece of metal moving at a third of the speed of light. Your armor can handle plasma, but it cracks like glass against a huge kinetic impact. We didn't play your game. We built the perfect counter to it. The Thaxian counselor spoke again, his voice now shaking. You said kinetic weapons. To get something moving at 30% of light speed, the amount of power needed for that is just astronomical.
How did you manage that without advanced shields to protect your own ships from the blast and energy wash?
We don't use shielding like yours, Chen explained. We use something we call a blade of armor. It's crude, it's cheap, and it's brutally effective. When your plasma cannons strike our ships, the outer layers just melt away, soaking up the energy and shielding the hull. It's that simple. A lot of our tech is simple, Counselor. That's what makes it strong. It's reliable, it's easy to mass produce, and it doesn't need any rare exotic materials. The screen displayed a human warship. It was hideous, a blocky mess clearly designed for function, not beauty. Our ships are stubborn things. They're built with layers of backup systems. You knock one system offline, and there are 3 more waiting to take its place. If a part breaks, you can swap in a new one in seconds. I know they're not sleek or elegant like your starships, but they get the job done. And while you were all busy polishing your chrome, we were busy building thousands of them. It was like a switch flipped in the chamber. An entire species, pushed to the edge, had secretly turned their whole planet into a weapons factory, and none of the great galactic powers had a clue. A delegate from a small species called the Yark stood up, his voice shaking. Representative Chen, your tactics were barbaric. You used your own ships as bait. You sent your own people on suicide runs just to destroy one of our dreadnoughts. You offered no quarter and took no prisoners.
Is that just how your species makes war?
Chen's face was like carved stone, impossible to read. Yes, she said, her voice completely flat. When we fight to win. We don't care about glory or what you call honor. We fight so we can wake up and see another sunrise. Every single pilot who climbed into a cockpit for that battle knew it was probably a one-way trip. They signed up anyway because they knew exactly what was on the line. If the Vorathaians had won, Earth would be just another slave colony. Our children and their children would have been born into bondage. We made our choice. We would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. Her eyes swept across the room, pausing on the delegates from worlds that had already bent the knee to the Empire. I'm sure some of you think we're monsters, but think about this. We gave Admiral Kreth an off-ramp. We told him to turn his fleet around. But he just plowed ahead, absolutely convinced of his own superiority. He looked at us like we were primitives who would just roll over for him. He was wrong, and his entire fleet died for his arrogance. The Draxian observer leaned in, his voice a low growl. But your stealth technology, how in the galaxy did you hide thousands of ships from their deep space sensors? Chen's answer was disarmingly simple. Basic physics. We engineered our ships to run cold with almost no emissions. We used passive sensors right up until the moment we fired. We hid our fleet where your scanners would never think to look twice, inside the asteroid belt, among the rings of Saturn, even on the far side of our own moon. We were hiding in plain sight the entire time, looking like nothing more than space junk and dead satellites.
You were searching for powerful warships, with shields flaring and weapon systems glowing.
she continued, a faint, chilling smile on her face. You weren't looking for quiet, patient predators waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. You believed your advanced technology made you invincible, but we had patience and a plan. We spent 40 years doing nothing but watching you, learning your every tactic. We became the galaxy's foremost experts on Vorathaean military strategy without ever firing a shot. By the time the first missile left the tube, we already knew how you were going to react before you did. The High Chancellor Vexith's red eyes burned with a rage he could hardly keep in check. You call it self-defense, but you annihilated an entire armada. 12,000 Vorathaean soldiers lost their lives in that battle, he spat, and their only crime was following orders to expand the glorious empire. Chen turned to face him directly, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. Their crime was attempting to conquer our home. High Chancellor, they appeared on our doorstep with 800 warships and offered us two choices, surrender or be annihilated. They swore they would turn our cities to glass if we resisted. What did you really expect us to do? Greet them with open arms? Thank them for the privilege of becoming your slaves? A thick, heavy silence descended upon the great hall. Vexith was speechless. Chen pressed on, her voice tight with fury. And let's be perfectly clear about something else. For 40 years, we've been monitoring your Galactic Council broadcasts. We listened to all 47 of you debate the Vorathaean expansion. We heard you politely call them subjugation operations. We watched you vote to officially recognize conquered planets as part of your empire. And not once, not a single time did we hear a single objection. Not one of you ever had the courage to stand up and suggest that maybe, just maybe, the Vorathaeans should be stopped. Her gaze swept the chamber once more, and one after another, the delegates lowered their heads, unable to meet her eyes. You all knew exactly what the Empire was. You watched them consume world after world, and you did nothing. You were too scared, too weak, or perhaps just too comfortable to risk doing what was right. So don't you dare stand there and lecture me about the lives we were forced to take to defend our freedom. You had 40 years to build something better than this empire. You simply chose to live on your knees instead. The Thaxian counselor finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. You are not wrong, Representative Chen. We should have done more. We should have resisted, but the Vorathaean Empire was it was too powerful. None of us could have faced them alone. Then you should have faced them together, Chen shot back, her tone sharp as broken glass. There are 47 species represented on this council, billions of beings on thousands of worlds. If you had united against them 3 centuries ago, the empire never would have grown into the monster it is today. But you didn't. You chose the quiet life of a servant over a freedom that was worth fighting for. She let her words hang in the silence before her voice shifted, becoming calm and absolute. Earth will not repeat your mistake. We are not joining your council. We want no part of your politics. We will never again place our survival in the hands of others. Effective immediately, we are claiming our solar system and a 50 light-year buffer zone around it. Any ship that crosses that border without our direct permission will be deemed hostile and will be destroyed. There will be no warnings. There will be no second chances. 50 light-years, Vexith sputtered, his face a mask of disbelief. That space covers 17 star systems. You can't possibly defend a territory that vast. For the very first time, a real, almost mocking smile touched Chen's lips. Can't we, High Chancellor? You also thought we couldn't defend one tiny planet. You thought 800 warships would be more than enough to bring us to heel. Tell me, how did that plan work out for you? She brought the star map up again, where a massive red sphere now marked the new human territory. For 40 years, all you ever saw in our system were primitive chemical rockets. You never saw the orbital shipyards. You never found the weapons arrays. You never once dreamed we were preparing for total war. What on earth makes you so certain you know what we've been building in the star systems right next to ours? A cold wave of understanding washed over the chamber. If the humans had built a secret war machine in their own system for 40 years, what could they have possibly built in the surrounding systems in all that time? How deep did this go? We have automated defense platforms deployed throughout the entire exclusion zone, Chen stated plainly. They've been sitting there, silent and waiting, for the past 20 years. You never noticed them because you weren't looking for them. These platforms have one simple directive: eliminate any unauthorized vessel. They do not negotiate. They do not give warnings. They just remove the threat. She dismissed the map and looked at the stunned delegates one last time. Humanity is now formally withdrawing from all galactic affairs. We do not want your trade agreements. We do not want your alliances. We do not want your politics. We simply want to be left alone. Stay out of our space and we will stay out of yours. Cross that line and you will share the fate of the Vorathayans. But what if we need your help? A small voice called out. It was the delegate from Plinix, a world the Vorathayans had subjugated 200 years ago. What if new empires rise to fill the void? Now that the empire is fractured, will you help us? Chen looked at the Plinix delegate, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of what might have been regret crossed her face. No. Earth's policy is one of isolation. We will not be drawn into your conflicts. We are not your saviors. You must save yourselves. Build your own fleets. Forge your own alliances. Create the peaceful galaxy you always claimed to want, but do it yourselves. Her tone softened just a fraction. I'm sorry, but humanity has learned a bitter lesson. We cannot trust others for our protection. We cannot rely on treaties or councils. The only security that matters is the strength you build for yourself, and for that reason, Earth is closed. The flickering image of Representative Chen was the last thing the Galactic Council ever saw of a human. This is the first and final official message humanity will ever send you, she said, her voice calm but cold. Don't bother calling. Don't send your diplomats. And for your own sake, do not even think about testing the borders of our exclusion zone. We've said everything we need to. Just remember what happened to the Varathian 7th Fleet and stay away. Her hologram blinked out of existence, plunging the council chamber into a stunned, terrified silence. It had only been 6 months since the 14-minute war, an event that didn't just win a battle, it shattered the entire galaxy. The Vorathayan Empire, the undisputed master of known space for 300 years, was completely and utterly broken. Can you imagine being forced to your knees for 140 years, only for someone to tell you that you can finally stand up? That's exactly what happened the day the Vorathayan Empire's stranglehold on the galaxy shattered. The moment their legendary 7th Fleet was turned into stardust, the whole corrupt empire started to crumble, and the first planet to rise up was ours, Draxus. For generations, they did everything they could to crush our warrior spirit, but they never succeeded. The second we heard the news, we, politely, showed their officials the door and declared ourselves a free world. We'd kept our old starship blueprints hidden for over a century, just waiting for a day like this. And just like that, a revolution began. Thaxia, Plen, Yellen, a dozen worlds followed our lead, their voices joining ours in a chorus of freedom. On some worlds, the occupiers just packed their bags and left without a word. On others, the local Vorathayan garrisons made a final bloody stand, refusing to accept that their empire was gone. The empire tried to clamp down, of course. They sent what ships they had left to crush the rebellions, but it was like trying to patch a dam with 1,000 holes using only your fingers. Their forces were stretched so thin it was just sad. In only 3 months, they lost half their territory. The worlds that remained loyal started fighting each other, with every power-hungry commander suddenly declaring himself the one true emperor. The very species that had conquered 17 civilizations was now eating itself alive from the inside out. And the Galactic Council? They became a complete joke. They were already the laughingstock of the galaxy for being totally blindsided by the humans, and this was the final nail in their coffin. Nobody even bothered attending meetings anymore. The Grand Council Station, once a shining symbol of unity, turned into a ghost town. The few politicians who did show up just sat around pointing fingers while the galaxy burned around them. I heard the Thaxian counselor once gave a passionate speech to a room full of empty chairs. He said, "We have failed. We allowed the Voratheians to build an empire of fear, and we had the nerve to call it stability. We called it peace, but it was a peace held at gunpoint. And the moment someone stared down the barrel of that gun and didn't blink, he continued, the entire illusion came crashing down. A Draxian military observer, standing in the back, simply nodded. It's an arms race now, the observer said quietly. Every species is scrambling to build warships, studying what the humans did, desperately trying to unlock the secret of how they broke the most powerful military in history. Everyone is terrified they'll be the next target on some new conqueror's list. The Thaxian just sighed. And can you blame them? The humans taught the galaxy two brutal lessons. A giant fleet is worthless without a brilliant mind behind it, and in the end, the only one you can truly rely on is yourself. After Earth delivers that wake-up call, a strange, tense quiet fell over the galaxy. Trust was a forgotten luxury, and no one trusted the Council. How could they have missed a civilization with that much power hiding right under their noses? The Draxian ambassador had no answers. While the rest of the galaxy was lost in chaos and blame, the human sector went completely dark. They put up a 50 light-year keep-out sign around their system, and nobody was foolish enough to ignore it. Our most powerful long-range sensors picked up things happening out there. Massive structures were being assembled in Jupiter's orbit. Strange energy pulses were radiating from Saturn. An entire civilization was humming with unimaginable activity, but not a single ship ever crossed their self-imposed border. The whispers began to spread. Were they building a fleet of giant escape ships to flee the galactic chaos? Were they constructing planet killers to hold the rest of us hostage? Or were they creating something so new, so powerful, that it would make their last victory seem like a child's tantrum? The scariest part was that nobody knew, and nobody was stupid enough to go ask. Well, almost nobody. A small survey ship from the plant species made that fatal mistake. They were searching for new colony worlds and drifted a little too close, about 51 light-years from Earth. There was no warning shot, no turn back now message, just a silent flicker in the darkness as hidden defense platforms woke from sleep and tore their ship apart with railgun slugs. All 37 souls on that ship were gone in an instant. The message couldn't have been clearer. Earth was not playing games. Stay out, permanently. Over on Vexith, one of the last broken pieces of the old empire, the remaining military leaders were in a state of pure panic. They had lost all contact with 17 of their fleets. Their economy was in a death spiral. A brutal civil war was tearing through what little they had left. But the one thing that truly haunted their nights was Earth. "What's to stop them from coming for us?" one commander asked, his voice shaking. "What if they see how weak we are and decide to finish what they started?" "They won't," sighed Admiral Thraxus, one of the few high-ranking officers to survive the political purges after the 7th Fleet was lost. "The humans told us exactly what they want. They want to be left alone. As long as we stay out of their space, they have no interest in ours." "But what if the Draxians come looking for revenge?" another commander shot back. "Will the humans step in to help us then?" Thraxus let out a bitter, ugly laugh. "Help us? Were you not listening during Representative Chen's broadcast? She made it clear that Earth will not get involved in galactic politics. We are on our own. We dug this grave for ourselves the day we underestimated them, and now we get to lie in it." He pulled up a star chart, and a massive red sphere glowed where human space was marked. That 50 light-year bubble wasn't just a border. It was a declaration of independence from the rest of the galaxy. "The humans didn't just win a war," Thraxus said, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "They proved that you don't need a web of alliances to be safe. They proved you can stand alone." And now, every other species was scrambling to learn that same hard lesson. But in the quiet darkness of space, far from any prying eyes, a secret meeting was taking place. Representatives from 7 different species, including us Draxians, had gathered on a hidden ship. Our own governments didn't even know we were there. We called ourselves the Liberation Coalition, and our plan was to build a better future, together. Our delegate was the first to speak. "We all know why we're here,"
The Varathian Empire is a bad memory. The Galactic Council is useless, and humanity has shown us that true security comes from strength. The problem is, we can't all be Earth. We don't have 40 years in a unified world to prepare for the worst. So we'll do it together, the Thaxian representative countered. We'll pool our resources, share our technology, and build a defensive alliance so strong that nobody will ever get the idea to build another empire. But what about the humans? The Plen delegate asked, his voice laced with anxiety. What if they see our new alliance as a threat? Then we prove them wrong with our actions, our Draxian said firmly. We will show them that we respect their space. No flybys, no spy probes, nothing. We will make it perfectly clear that we want the exact same thing they do, to live in peace and choose our own destiny. Over the next few months, the Liberation Coalition quietly began to grow. More worlds joined our cause, sharing ship designs and coordinating their industrial efforts. We started adopting human strategies, relying on small, automated defense platforms and rugged, simple systems instead of the overly complex and fragile technology the Empire had favored. We studied the records of the battle in the Sol system like it was a sacred text, trying to reverse engineer every piece of their strategic genius. But we did one thing the humans never did. We learned to trust again. We shared everything, building an alliance founded on cooperation, not conquest. We were finally becoming what the Galactic Council had only ever pretended to be, a true partnership of equals, dedicated to mutual defense. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Representative Chen watched the Galactic intelligence reports stream across the main screen in the Unified Defense Command Center. The galaxy is hitting the reset button, her intelligence chief said. The Varathian Empire is officially history. Their former territories are consumed by civil wars, and about 15 species have formed their own small alliances. The largest of them is the Liberation Coalition. Ma'am, they're using our own strategies against a potential threat. Good, Chen replied, her gaze fixed on the screen. Let them learn. Let them learn to stand on their own 2 feet. Isn't that what we wanted all along? A galaxy of free peoples, not a collection of vassals. But what happens if they become strong enough to threaten us? A general asked from the side. What if they unite the rest of the galaxy against Earth? Chen simply smiled. She brought up a new display, showing the incredible explosion of human industry, cities floating in high orbit, entire asteroids being hollowed out for resources, fusion plants powering the moons of Jupiter, and shipyards, larger than anything the galaxy had ever conceived, were building the next generation of human civilization. The lesson was for them. The future was for us. Let them try, she said, her voice as cold as the void between stars. We took apart the Vathan 7th Fleet in 14 minutes, and that was with ships we designed 40 years ago. Do you honestly think we've just been sitting on our hands for the last 6 months? That we peaked? She expanded the holographic display, revealing ship designs with impossible drives and weapons that made their current legendary fleet look like ancient relics. The Varathians made a classic mistake, Chen stated flatly. They thought the war would be won by whoever had the most expensive hardware. But victory doesn't go to the wealthiest, it goes to the most prepared, the smartest fighters, the ones who simply refuse to lose. We spent 4 decades getting ready for them. We've spent the last 6 months preparing for everyone else. A young officer, his voice shaky with nerves, dared to speak up. Ma'am, with all due respect, some of us are worried we're planning for the wrong future. The galaxy isn't just a war zone anymore. New alliances are forming. Better ways are emerging. Maybe it's time we stopped hiding. We could be a part of it. Chen turned to the young man, and a hint of warmth thawed the ice in her gaze. I get that feeling. I really do. But our isolation policy is there for a damn good reason. The second we jump into galactic politics, we paint a massive target on our own backs. Every other power will either see us as a weapon to be used or a threat to be removed. We'd be dragged from one war to the next, bleeding for other people's problems. She walked to the main viewport, gazing down at the precious blue and green swirl of Earth.
Our own species spent centuries killing each other over imaginary lines on maps, different beliefs, and patches of dirt. We almost burned this beautiful world to a crisp with our own bombs. It took an enemy from the stars to finally make us work together. That unity is the most precious thing we have, and it's fragile. We can't risk it shattering by getting tangled up in the galaxy's forever wars. So we do nothing? The officer asked, his voice barely a whisper. We just watch while a new empire rises and crushes them? We do far more than nothing, Chen corrected him gently. We protect our home. We hold on to our strength and our hard-won freedom. We are living proof that a species can survive in this brutal universe by relying on itself. We are leading by example, not by giving orders. You don't need to conquer the galaxy to be safe. You just need the will to build your own walls and the firepower to make sure no one tears them down. She leaned back, her eyes tracking the streams of data on the main screen. Now, look at this, she said, her voice steady. Far out on the edge of their declared territory, something incredible was happening. 3 brand new alliances had emerged in the last month, built from the ashes of the Vorathaean Empire. Species that had been sworn enemies for generations were now sharing technology and coordinating defenses, figuring out how to stand on their own feet. It's working, she whispered. They're learning. Her intelligence chief was less optimistic. For now, coalitions like that are fragile. What happens when old rivalries flare up over a moon or a mining right? Chen just shrugged. Then they'll handle it. It's not our problem. Earth has what it needs. The rest is up to them. We now control 17 star systems, she reminded her staff, gesturing at the glowing map. That's more than enough room for us to grow for the next 1,000 years. We have the resources, the territory, and the military might to ensure our independence. That is the only thing that matters. She could practically feel the doubt coming from some of them. I know what you're thinking, that this is selfish. But what's the alternative? If we get involved, how long until we're fighting someone else's war? How long until they see our fleet not as our shield, but as their sword? Our founders had one clear directive, she went on. We fight for our survival, not for empire. We protect what is ours, and what is ours alone. By sticking to that one simple rule, they would never become the monsters they had just defeated. They would never be another galactic bully, enforcing their will on others for a so-called peace. As weeks bled into months, the galaxy began to heal itself without a single ship or order from Earth. A scrappy new liberation coalition grew to include 23 species, becoming a real regional power. The old Vorathaean warlords kept squabbling, bleeding each other dry. New trade routes buzzed with ships, connecting worlds that had been isolated for centuries. And through it all, Earth remained a ghost, utterly silent on the galactic networks. No one came in, and no one went out. The humans had vanished from the stage, leaving everyone else to wonder what they were plotting behind their quiet borders. Some called it the greatest waste in history. With human leadership and tech, a better, fairer galaxy could have been forged from the ashes. Others saw it as the ultimate act of wisdom. By refusing to play the great game of empires, humanity could never be corrupted by it. But on one thing, everyone agreed. The galaxy was forever changed. The fall of the Vorathaean Empire proved no one was invincible. Earth's shocking victory showed that raw determination and brilliant strategy could shatter superior technology anytime, anywhere. And humanity's silent retreat demonstrated that you didn't have to rule the board to survive the game. In the end, Earth got exactly what it wanted. Safety guaranteed by its own power, and peace guaranteed by sending a very clear message: leave us alone or else. The galaxy learned to give that silent corner of space a very, very wide berth. And so, the galaxy learned to keep its distance. Back in the command center, Representative Chen allowed herself a tiny, satisfied smile as she looked over the latest intel. The plan had worked perfectly. Earth was secure, humanity was free, the rest of the galaxy, for better or worse, was on its own. "Ma'am," an aide said, approaching her station, "it's the Liberation Coalition again. They're asking for diplomatic talks. They want to know if we'd consider sharing some of our defensive technology." Chen answered without even looking up. Send the standard reply. Our position is unchanged. We appreciate their respect for our borders, but we are not interested in treaties or technology transfers. Tell them to keep innovating, she added, almost as an afterthought. They've done a pretty good job so far. The aide nodded and walked away. Chen went back to her screen, watching the symbols of a civilization that was rebuilding and growing stronger in the quiet safety they had fought for. Earth was closed for business, and it would stay that way for as long as it took. Because humanity had learned the single hardest lesson the universe had to offer. In the end, the only one you can truly count on is yourself. Alliances break, treaties become worthless paper. The only thing that lasts is the strength you build with your own hands. The Vorathaean Empire, a dynasty that had ruled for 3 centuries, was erased in 14 minutes, 14 less time than it takes to brew a pot of coffee. And that was one lesson the galaxy would never forget. They would remember that Earth gave them one warning, and only one. Stay out, and the galaxy, having finally learned some sense, did exactly that.